In fact, worse, if forms that don't fit that sequence are found, that is a falsification of evolutionary theory. So it's got nothing to do with experiment in this case, because you're talking about fossils. I mean, unfortunately, fossils don't reproduce freely. I've tried to put two ammonites in the same drawer and sound the violins, but nothing happens. But nevertheless, they are the intermediate forms that we do know about follow exactly the predictions of evolutionary theory. Look, sometimes I'm asked, how is it that you could possibly falsify evolutionary theory? Find one bone of a human being or of a dinosaur in Precambrian rocks, and that will falsify evolution right there. But we know of millions and millions of bones in strata all over the world, and it has never been found.
Dr. Hovind?
Interesting. Okay. Well, again, we got 6 points brought up. The Bible does not teach the earth is flat. The Bible says it's round, Isaiah chapter 40. The Bible does not teach the earth is the center of the universe. If somebody says I went 50 miles an hour down the highway, technically you're going 50 miles an hour down the highway, plus you're going 700 miles an hour around the earth here at this latitude, plus you're going 66,000 miles an hour around the sun, plus the sun's going around the galaxy at a certain speed. So you lied when you said you're going 50 miles an hour. No. You gave the obvious evidence to an earthbound observer. The weatherman this morning said sunrise at 7:15. Was he lying? No, that's the way it is to an earthbound observer. It looks like the sun is rising. That's not lying. Now, as far as you're saying that the whales 55 million years ago and all this stuff, you're basing everything on the assumption that that dumb geologic column means something. Those layers of Earth are given a different age. All this was done in the early 1800s. Charles Lyell, 1830. Darwin didn't like round numbers, so he said one of the layers was 306,662,400 years old. But those layers are not different ages. They find petrified trees standing up all over the world, running through multiple layers of rock. Now, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. If you have petrified trees that are standing up and they're running through different rock layers, the layers are the same age, all formed in the flood of Noah.
Serendipitously, I have a related question for you. Can you explain why there are no large animal fossils in the lowest levels of sediment?
Can I explain why there are no large animal fossils in the lowest layers of sediment?
I.e. the oldest fossils, sedimentary layers.
Okay. First place, if you found a large animal fossil in any layer, who's going to decide the age of that layer? Somebody who already has the preconceived idea that this geologic column means something? Well, if the evolutionists get to make all the decisions of what goes where, then of course the evidence is going to fit their interpretation. But I would point out that animals automatically sort based upon, in a flood, they sort based upon body density, based upon intelligence, based upon habitat, based upon mobility, and certainly based upon liquefaction. There's an interesting phenomena that takes place when waves come by. The high part of the wave is heavier than the low part of the wave. If I knew that question was coming, I could have got into that here on liquefaction. I got plenty of stuff on that. But pressing and relieving the pressure on sand, you can go down to the beach where I live in Pensacola, Florida, just walk out a few feet and stand there. As the waves come by, the pressure exerts, squeezes water into the sand, then the low part of the wave comes by, the pressure is relieved, and sand is actually hopping up off the bottom. If you don't move a muscle, within a few minutes you'll be knee-deep in sand. Liquefaction is what it's called. A guy took an aquarium full of sand, rocks, gravel, mud, grass, trees, a bunch of different things, and dead fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, mixed them all together and subjected it to liquefaction for a couple of days, and it sorted them. Fish went to the bottom, birds went to the top, based on liquefaction. You need to get the book In the Beginning by Walt Brown. The flood is the best explanation for the sorting of the fossils we find, not some evolutionary sequence.
It is very interesting that you keep mentioning the geological column as if it were invented by evolutionary biologists to explain how things work by evolution. In fact, the geological column was invented by creationist geologists before Darwin's publication of The Origin of Species. So that's pretty difficult to use it as an anti-evolution argument. The other thing is, I really doubt that Darwin said 3,662 blah, 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 and that quotation was from a creationist book. It was probably made up. I'd like you to show me where it was published in Darwin's book. I've never seen it, but anyway, Darwin wasn't that precise. He knew better. You quoted, could you stop the time? You quoted at one point a certain figure, precise figure that Darwin has said about the
This concerns sedimentary layers. Can you explain why there are no large animal fossils in the lowest level of sedimentary rock?
What was that again?
That was the original question.
Yeah. But anyway, so the geological column is not a problem. for evolutionary biology, simply because, first of all, it is derived independently from the fossil record, because you can date the rocks with absolute dating methods. And second of all, because it was actually invented by creationists. And if we have to go back to the Bible, I hate to do this, but quotes about four-cornered earth, an earth with four corners and a firmament staying on pillars, that seems pretty awfully suspicious as a metaphor for a weatherman. But if you think that that's what it is, that's fine. Go ahead.
How could there be transitions from plants to animals and increasing complexities in other species with no living species that is also transitional alive, specifically ape to human? I think they're looking for a living example.
A living example of a proto-human. We killed them all. I mean, it's pretty easy. Yeah. There are examples, there are plenty of examples of intermediates, by the way, among different species of both animals and plants. The human lineage is pretty small, incidentally. There are only a few species that belong to the human lineage. And that really, truly is because most of them went extinct. Probably the latest intermediate stage, or the latest close relative to us, which was Neanderthal man, it went extinct several thousand years ago, of course. And possibly one of the explanations is that it went extinct because we did kill him. We are pretty good at killing, if you haven't noticed. We have been directly responsible for the extinction of countless species, both in historical times and today. I'm not just blaming McDonald's. It's a lot of it has been the history of humankind all over again. So, yeah, if the species are very close to each other, by the way, there is a very well-known principle in ecology that says that those species are going to be in very high competition with each other. And you can actually demonstrate with laboratory experiments that the result of very high, intense competition between forms that are very similar to each other is that one of the two is going to go down the drain. One of them is going to go extinct. So very likely, well, that's what happened to other proto-humans. But the fossils are still there. They're telling us the story. So I don't really see what the problem is.
I'm going to need that question one more time. I got lost in the shuffle here.
How can there be transitions from plants to animals and increasing complexities in other species with no living species that is a transition alive, specifically ape to human?
How can there be no living species transition, specifically apes to humans? I think if you get the book called Bones of Contention by Marvin Lubenow, who spent 25 years studying all of the so-called cavemen, you would find that every one that has been used as evidence has been disproven. You mentioned Australopithecus afarensis, better known as Lucy. Charles Oxnard studied Lucy, did a computer multivariate analysis of all the bones, spent 16 years studying Lucy, and so he's the most knowledgeable expert in the world, and he believes in evolution. But he said, folks, Lucy is just an unusual chimpanzee. It is not a missing link. So you need to study Oxnard's work on that before you tell